Daki jinso gibe sunam jirola penjir zanji drobar sho sangye chetan sogi chonam la chancho bardo dani chapsum je daki jinso gibe sunam jirola penjir zanji drobar sho sangye chetan sogi chonam la chancho baradu dani chapsum ji dagi jinzo gibe sunam ji jola penjir zanji drobar sho zamjin damji dewa dan dewe judan dambra juj donga ji judan drobar juj donga mebe dewa tamba dan nindrava joji nerin shata nidan ravi danyon chembala ne prajurchi. So now please think to yourselves that we must bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space to the state of completely perfect Buddhahood. And the way for us to do that, excuse me, I've got to turn off my devices so that they don't disturb me. One started to disturb me. So now let me start again. So now please think to yourselves that we must bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space to the state of completely perfect Buddhahood. And the way to do that, well, first of all, we have to achieve Buddhahood ourselves. But even until then, we can still do a little bit of service, serving the gurus, serving the teachings, serving sentient beings. And one way to do this is by engaging in the activity of translation. And so in terms of the activity of translation, we have to study it. We have to learn how to translate. And so there are different ways to study. There's formal study, and then there's getting thrown in the deep end and just doing it and learning through your mistakes. And sometimes there's a combination of both. So here we're doing a little bit more of the formal study in a sense. I'm not sure how formal I'm being right now. At any rate, we've talked about general issues in translation. We talked about general, what do we say? We talked about some general points about translation in on a couple of talks, one a few months ago. Then we've had this current series. We talked one general issues about translation. We talked about verse, and we've talked about prose last week. And so now the actual question is, because we haven't got a lot of time since I have my Abhidharma course starting, we need to kind of wrap things up, but we need to get a little bit of a practical sense of how do you actually engage in it? What do you actually do? Or what do I actually do? You can develop your own ways of working. You don't have to say, oh, Khenpo David says to do like this, therefore thou shalt do it exactly as he says. No, you've got to find your own methods, and they're going to be slightly different for everyone. So basically it's kind of like a little bit of a demonstration of what I do, what I think about, how I think about things as I go through and translate. And I'll kind of talk you through the process of beginning a bad draft, basically. The first draft, as I said last week, the first draft is always terrible. And so you should go in it with the expectation that your first draft is going to be dreadful. So I always call it my horrid first draft. So we're not working for quality right now. That comes later, right? So what I'll do is go through that. And then for our next session, which will be next Tuesday, then I'd like to ask you to prepare your own draft in your own language. Now, that means that if you're doing French, I can be of a little bit of help. If you're doing Spanish, I might be able to figure out what you're talking about. If you're doing Portuguese, I might be able to figure out what you're talking about. I don't know what language Evelyn translates into. If it's German, I might be able to figure out what you're talking about. But, if you're translating into Croatian, I'm a little bit lost. So I don't know, and it doesn't matter. But what you need to do is work through it on your own so that then next week we can talk about the problems that you had, the issues that you faced, the difficulties that you had, and we can see how can we solve them, because some of the issues are going to be general for every different language. Some of the issues are going to be specific for a specific language. And some of the issues are going to be specific for a specific language in a specific region at a specific time. So we all have to think about all of that. So what we will do today is I'll just start sharing my screen. And I have this, here we are, but I think that's what I want to share. Get rid of that. Okay. So here we have, are these letters big enough for everyone to see? I'll make them bigger. It always helps to have big letters.
Yeah.
So is that, okay. I can make it even bigger for the time being. Okay. So in doing this, I wanted to pick an extract. I mean, because obviously this is not a whole lot of time. I wanted to pick an extract of something for this and for this exercise, because a whole work is too much for the time that we have. So this is from an excerpt from a work by here, the Panchen Shakirshi Badra Zebe, Jugu. So you don't have to worry about the title. So Panchen Shakirshi Badra is the Kashmiri Pandit of the 12th and 13th century, I think. He was a teacher of many great masters, including the Sakya Pandita was one of his students. And so this work is included in a text called the Chachin Gyashung, the Indian texts of Mahamudra, that was compiled by the 7th Karmapa Chudat Gyatso. And actually, currently, Trungpa Rinpoche is giving the Lung, the transmission of these texts over Zoom to people in our monastery. For all of you in Europe, the sessions happen at like 3 in the morning, so it's not a very convenient time for you all. But for us in North America, it's okay. So when Rinpoche read this, I thought this was a great little text. And then the next morning, we were talking about this, and we decided to do this, and I immediately knew that I wanted to do an excerpt from this. And so that's why I picked this one. It could have been anything, really. But you have to, one of the first things is that this is, here it says, it's Danga, right? This is Danga. This is not just a sutra. You have to be careful. When you're doing a text, it's always best to have the transmissions for it before you begin. The transmission, or if you don't have the transmission, but your guru says, translate this, then I think it's okay. If you just say, I want to translate this text, and you don't have the transmission and no guru told you to do it, better to wait. Better to get the transmission first and then translate later, just because it's important to get that transmission for the general Dharma reasons. And so here, and then in the title, Rinchin Drugu. So Dru is like often like seed or it's like seed syllable or like a grain. So it's like 9 grains of jewels or 9 gemstones might be a way to put it. Now I'm not going to make you do the title. We're going to focus on the text. But what this tells us is that actually there are 9 gems here. So the way the text is set up in general is that there are 3 sets of 3 instructions, one for the preliminaries, one for the main practice, and then one for like the enhancement and the follow through. So we're looking at the beginning of the section on the preliminaries. So I'm just going to read it first, because one of the first things you should do, excuse me, one of the first things you should always do is read the text that you're going to translate. At best is if you've already studied the text. This is the optimal situation. You've studied it, you've had someone go through it, you know the text, and then you begin to translate it. That is great, but it doesn't happen very often. So here it is. Nuruchiwa samne chashin delong me, kana jude samne nieju chungla zim, jodudonga samna, sila ngan mi cha, dusum damja chakte bimbe tomar gom. So de la tomar konare ne wembara tamayi number yimba tada bangla, lusem kong le, samten yi chaja cha, chiwara lama da, ningar yidangi la gom la, so jatu da. Tene yinandu ku la da teringam ma de kensare. This is strange here. That's an interesting thing right there. Tonup konar michiwe deng topan me chiguna raban lama lu Jingpo namlang, jeba ge, tamaru juna, sube tamion. Dena, ninsen jun chasu jembe sung la, teringam, donup kona chi nyamdu sam. Deang, ne kandu dujan, deni du chiwe dushe, cho gandang cho kyang, deda ma jawar chiwe dushe. Chawa chi che kyang, de ma tsar bar, chiwe dushe chate, samba de jundu gom na, zedi nangwa jilang chamlong me jing delong mebe, tamagi shenpa ranglong du juro. Detara nga shine me jing labar min jurte, jir legende mi lue, gendik chungu le dedu chembra jur. Rangi cheba shengi shena mi min. Nienpu ma jongi barudo le chumi sa. Dewe chuba ma segi barudo jude chashin chala zem gube. Jirogi bedang doju denje le chungwe tam jun sam. Dun lepra gom. Lepra samna rangi sampe cheda ma dapa le chinji lo charwa dang. Dapa le sangan charwa puri simbra nupayins. Okay, so that's the text. And I read it for two reasons. First of all, is to give you a sense of how it sounds in Tibetan. Is, not that my reading is great, but it gives you a sense of the sound. Because if you have a sense of the sound and the rhythm of the text, it really helps you know where you break things apart. One of the big problems we have is we look at Tibetan and there's like all these sek and syllables and we don't know where the words go. So the way to overcome that in the beginning is to spend a lot of time just reading, not even worrying about understanding, just reading. And you've got to start. I mean, even if you haven't done this, you got to go back to the beginning and do the jorlo, the maya da nya shapshi nura nur da shapshi du ao chagi gu chi wa bao sa ma sa sam na cha ga sa cha. So you got to do that until you can just do it. And the reason why I'm saying this is that when I was in your position years ago, I didn't. And I always had problems reading. What helped me with my reading was when Trungpa Rinpoche told me to start a Tibetan course in Namo Buddha, and I started that in 2014 was our first year. And all of a sudden I had to teach new students how to read, and I discovered I can't do it myself. So I didn't practice very hard, but I did a little bit. And by actually teaching people how to read, I kind of got better at reading myself. And it is really helpful for knowing where do the words go? So you can just look at it and you don't have to think. Because when you think about it, when we learn how to read in English or Spanish or Portuguese, whatever language it is, you learn when you're what, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old? And you spend a lot of time looking at books that, in English it says, the cat is black. Things like that. You're just reading stupid things when you're a child. You've got pictures to keep you interested, but you're just learning how to put sounds, letters, and make them into sounds and words and getting a lot of familiarity. We haven't done that with Tibetan. So it's really important to do it with Tibetan so that you can figure it out. Because if you can't look at the words and get the sound, then it's much harder to actually do that. Okay, so that's kind of a general thing. So now the next thing to do when translating is the way I work is you've got this whole thing. And I suppose I could just start, there are two ways to do it. You can open up another document and work with that on the side. Like I could go here, I could do a new document. So I've got my new document here. I've got this document there. But then you're going back and forth and you can't always easily see what's going on. So instead of doing that, instead of working in a new document, what I do is I take the document, the original Tibetan that I'm working from, and then I just pasted it. And then when I want to translate, I kind of look for, well, where's the, where are the kind of breaks? Well, where am I going to make a paragraph in English? And at first you're not entirely certain. You can always change it, right? When you're translating, you don't have to do it, expect that what you're doing is going to be exactly the same. So I'm going to look at this and I look at here, oh, look, we've got 4 lines here. These 2 lines in the English, right? This looks like kind of like a different one section. And actually, so I make a paragraph there. Then I'm going to put another paragraph there. And here, look, I'm going right. I've got I always set up my documents so that then when I push the return on the Tibetan, it then goes into a nice English style. But you don't have to do it. You can do what you want. So here what we've got is we've got at the beginning, if we look at this, here, notice that here we've got nishe, right? We've got double she. There's a double she. There's a double she. There's no double she here because there's a cha. After the ga, you omit the she, right? But it's still essentially a double she. And then a double she. So what we have here, actually, these first 4 lines are a set of verses. It's one stanza, right? So 4 lines of verse. Now, for a present exercise, don't worry about verse. We're thinking more about prose. The verse will come later. Even though I always like the verse, but at this point, we're not going to worry about it. It brings in too many other problems. And so then we think about it. If you look at this paragraph, what it says, Nyurudu chiwa sam na, chajin delong me. So Nyurudu chiwa is like what? Chiwa is what? Death, right? Nyurudu is fast. So if you, and sam is to think, right? If you think you will die soon. This is putting it in really colloquial English, and it's not necessarily going to stay at this level of language for a final draft, but you just want to put down something right now for the meaning. Then here we've got chakshin de long me. Chakpa we understand, right? Chakpa is like grabbing and grasping and wanting, right? Like greed or wanting. De is what? De is to stay or to sit. Now, what does long, long? This is one that you might not know. So the first thing you have to do is, like I said, you need to read it. If you read the text several times, you will begin to get an idea of what this word means before you look it up. So I suggest that you read the text several times. I had a teacher in Shedra who recommended read something aloud 7 times before you begin to study it. If you do that, you actually get a lot of understanding. And it really is true. You do get a lot of that understanding just from reading the same text over and over again. So I recommend that you just go through. And so when you're looking at this, the first thing you can do is just read this verse a few times. Then you read that a couple times and you get an idea for how it is. So here we go. But you're still stuck on that word long. Well, so at this point, when you're actually working it, after you've read it through 3 times and you're doing your first draft, you've got 2 ways you can do it. You can either take a stab and just say, I think it's this, or you can look at the dictionary. Now, last week, I showed you all a dictionary that I have online. Or on my computer. It only runs on the Mac. And it's also one that's hard to send to other people. I tried sending it to Nerea, but I don't know if she received it. And I don't see her right now, at any rate. But there are also ways, there are dictionary files that you can get and load in, on the Mac at least, you can load them in your own default dictionary. And I'm sure that there are ways you can do this on Windows too. So you can get the dictionaries. Now the question is, so I'm going to look up this word long. So I'm going to go to my dictionary. Another way you can do it is if you download the Tibetan Tool App. This is basically the Tibetan Tool App for your iPhone or Android. It's on both. You use it there, and then you're just looking at a different device. I don't have my phone next to me right now, so I can't show you how you do it. But so it's basically the same as this. You go here and you go long, just typing in long. And see here, it gives me the list. So here we have the definitions given from this. So here's kompa dan chokpe du. Kompa means like like to have time. Chokpa is like having time. So time when you're free, leisure time, or the time to do something. The second definition given here is tada yiju me. So it's like the lower part of a horse or a mare or a horse or a donkey. I don't think it's that one. Shakeshri is not talking about the anatomy of horses and donkeys right now. So we're going to figure it's this first one. So here, the important point, I mentioned it to you last time, is look at the Tibetan definitions in the dictionaries first. Because if you go down here and scroll down, and it's the same on the iPhone, you will see all of these things: leisure, free time, horse, mule, jumet. become blind, lose one's eyesight, abdomen. So it's got all these things in English. If you look at all of these definitions in English, you aren't going to know which one it is. And sometimes this one, it's not so bad actually, except I'm not sure where they're getting abdomen from the Tibetan. Maybe it's in one or the other. I've never really seen it. Usually with the abdomen, you talk about the ko, not the kom. At any rate, so if you look at the Tibetan, and in particular the Tsigzu Chenmo, you will have a better chance of getting the right meaning. So long here, say it's like the time. It's like you'll have, so if you think let me get into English. You'll think you'll have no time to, chakpa is to be attached, or to, de is to stay, right? Well, in English, what would we say? You don't have time to stay. It's not like that. You'd say, I don't have time to sit around. So if you think about the meaning, so you have to think a little about the meaning. What's he talking about? He's talking about remembering impermanence. And the important point of impermanence is remembering that you don't have time to waste in this lifetime. So if you keep that thought in mind when you're translating, if you understand that meaning, then it's easier to pick words that hit the meaning. So here, if you think you will die soon, you'll have no time to be attached or to sit around. This is a very, very colloquial translation of this. When you go through and make a second draft, then you might think, oh, that's just too colloquial. I don't want to deal with that, right? Then here we go to the next one, next line. Kana jude samna nieje chungla zem. So karana, is that karapo is right? You know karana, right? White and black. Jude is easy, cause and effect. Samna. Samna is the same. So all of these first three lines are the same. There's something that you samna, right? So it's going to be the same beginning. If you think, then here it's going to be about white and black, cause and effect, right? You will, and here we have Nieje Chula Zen. Nieje is fairly standard. You might have seen this. Nyepa is bad. You could go as far as say evil, but I wouldn't recommend that. Je is what? Je is like jipa, action. So bad actions or bad behavior. Chung, we all know chung wara, chung. Zempa. Do you know the word zempa? Well, again, here, if you don't know the word, then you go to your dictionary. Type in Zem, or you do it on your phone. And what do we have? Rangla tsunze chepe dun. Tsunzin chepe. And that's like you've had enough. That's one. Or another one is Rangla sura chepe dun, to protect yourself. So it's like holding back from doing something, right? So Zempa, and when you look at it in Dharma text, it's often used in the context of Dikpa la Zempa, right? So it's like refraining or abstaining, right? Protecting yourself from it, not doing. So we could say here, abstain. You could say, oops, editing. But the point now is not to do too much editing. But we've got an issue in this line. And this is these words, karana. And so in English, we've got the black and white and black. So these words, if you had been translating 50 years ago, you would just say white and black, no question. 100 years ago, absolutely white and black. Because in English, in older English language, we say white as meaning good and black as meaning bad, right? In terms of moral, right? A white behavior, a white action, a black action. When you have someone who's an evil person in old language, they would be called a blackguard, and things like that. But because of the racial history in the United States, these days, we can't say white and black in the United States. And if you translate it, people will be upset. So it's sometimes better to think about it. Now, you have to look and think, in my language, is this a problem? So in English in the United States, it's a problem. You have to do it. So in English, it might be better to say, and I'm not completely happy with this, but I don't know a better alternative. Positive and negative would be one way to say it. Another would say good and bad, or good and evil. These are all different different alternatives. I'm going to say positive and negative for now. I'm not a big fan of it because they're so long, is for one point. If you want to put it in a verse later, it's not so easy. So here you have to be careful about your own language. And it might even be different by region. For example, in Portuguese, you've got Portugal Portuguese and you've got Brazil Portuguese. And I think that in Brazil, there also is a similar racial history as in the United States, where you had a lot of Black African slaves were brought. And so if you say, I'm not going to try to say the Portuguese words, it's probably something like, I don't know. Anyways, white and black in Portuguese, are you going to get the same racial things that you get in American English? And if you are, be careful, right? That's just, you just have to be careful about that. So that's speaking about that issue, because when we are teaching, when we're translating the Dharma, we want it to be something that people can understand. We're not doing, I'm not saying positive and negative because I want to be a social justice warrior. I'm saying positive and negative instead of white and black because I want people to not get stuck on those words and go off in some other direction. I want to be able to understand the meaning. So, right? So that's why I'm using those words. Okay. Then the next line, 조루등어 삼나 시뱅안 미차 시랑안 미차. So if you think about the suffering of 6 droa. Now in English, we often say wanderers for droa. So I'm going to put that in. I often use it. 6 wanderers. Silangang micha. You will not be. Now we have a ngang here. What is this ngang? There are a bunch of different words that start with the syllable ngang, but the word ngang on its own, excuse me, means like the nature of something. Often it's translated in English as state, right? And you can use it in context, but you have to be careful because a nature and a state are different. What is it really actually referring to? Sila ngang mi cha. So I think maybe you will naturally, maybe if we could say here, naturally, not be, oh, and then we have this word cha, chaga cha. What's that? Because the word cha, when this spelling means to break, right? Or should this actually be, is this a misspelling for this word, chagasa cha? Now you have to look at this. Now with this text, we actually have another edition. Now what did I thought I had it open earlier. And then I closed it accidentally. There's another edition of this. Let me get it open. Oh, that's the wrong one. It's in here. Okay, and there we go, right to it. So this is the same thing. It's a different edition. And this one has been edited better. And here it says, right here, ngang michat. Do you see where I am right there? Or should I put a big red mark on it so you can see? Can I do that? No. What can I do? Take this. I can make something, I think here. There we go. So ngang michat, right? So that's the question. So in this edition, it says chagasa cha. In the other edition, it says chaga cha. Tibetan manuscripts, Tibetan printed editions are filled with spelling mistakes. And this is just a problem you're going to have to come to. So I think what happened is that this computer input was done by people who very carefully reproduced the original Tibetan print from long ago, exactly including all the spelling mistakes. Okay. And this edition, someone said, that's a spelling mistake. We're going to fix it. Okay. Now it's helpful to look at that when you're translating to be able to see. So I'm going to put that one away. You will naturally not be. So we're going to say this must be cha. It's not breaking, it's to be attached. You'll naturally not be attached, right? So then we go, these damchi chak det yin be tomar gom. Okay, these three, chak det, and what does chak det mean? I'm going to take a look in my dictionary again. And actually, I'll do this more, even though I've had a lot of experience translating, and I often have a good idea. I often look in the dictionary, chakde. And here we've got um, two English definitions. We don't have a Tibetan definition. But Rangjun Yeshe, Eric, Eric Pemakunzang is a good translator. So we can think he's kind of reliable, I think. But often, not always, but in this sort of thing, I think he is. And also when you think about how the word cha is often used, like when you have the one that Trang Rinpoche always speaks about, kaso mitapo gombade tomar, chua kui kien, bardu stundala kui cha, right? So the cha is often used like, and when you're riding a horse in Tibetan and you have a rider's crop that you're going to whack the butt of the horse with, the whip, that's called a cha. I guess they must have used a piece of iron. So it's like the spur is something like that. So how do we say this in English? So you could say, if, what do we say? These three are the iron whip of, now Tamchu, this is one that a lot of people translate this as genuine Dharma. I once asked His Holiness about this, and he suggested true Dharma. True Dharma. So meditate on them first. So for a phrase like Tamchu, you should decide on something that you're going to use that works in your language. That people are going to expect. People will say genuine Dharma, people say holy Dharma, people say all sorts of things. So I just didn't know which to use. Genuine, the English word genuine is overused. And in particular, when you watch reality shows, singing contests, they always talk about people being so genuine. I just, it's got these connections. Genuine and authentic have these connotations in current day English. And that makes me kind of like, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to get anywhere near that sort of thought. I don't want anyone to think that I'm sitting in a red chair with a button to push. I don't want to go there and say, this is authentic, So I asked His Holiness what to say, and he said true Dharma. And the reason he gave for it is that in the Chinese translation of the term, it's translated meaning in this meaning, the true Dharma. And if you look at the Sanskrit Sad Dharma, the Sad is also related to the Sanskrit word Satya, which means truth. So anyway, so that's why I say true Dharma. Okay, so that gives you an idea on how I'm working on all that. I wonder if we might take a moment for some questions right now. Do you have any questions or things that you want to know in this particular set of 4 lines? No, is it all clear? Okay, we're going to keep going.
I have one question on the
excellent.
On the third line. Siula is included in 6 wanderers.
Oh, Dunga Samna. 6 wonders. No, you mean the Sila?
Sila.
Oh, I missed that, didn't I? Sipa. Yes, this is an interesting word. Sipa is like you have nang si, you're right? So often in English, we translate this as existence. So I should have put it in, I missed that. This is a good thing that you all are keeping me honest, right? So you could say to existence. You will naturally not be attached to existence. So you can tell that si goes with the second part of this phrase. And why? Because it's got that la right here. That la tells you that this is going to be connected to that somehow, okay? So that's connected, and the way it's connected is that you are not attached to si. Now, in English, we always translate si, or often translate si as existence. What it actually refers to is the link of interdependence becoming. You've got of the 12 links of interdependence, you've got the sepa, lempa, sipa. I think that's the 9th. Is that the 9th, or is that the 10th? It's the 9th or the 10th of the link. I remember them in order when I go through the beginning, but to say which number it is, that's harder. Anyway, sipa, it means the karmic actions that cause you to take rebirth in samsara. So we translate it as becoming in English. What it really refers to is that those actions that make you do things. So it's karma. But in effect, it means all living beings, or to being in the realms. So in English, we often translate it more idiomatically as existence. Ontologically or in philosophically, that's maybe not the best, but in terms of people understanding, it's good. So you can think about it. I mean, the English word existence is a cognate of the French word existence. It's probably a derivative of that word. Does it have the same meaning in English as in French? You guys know better than me, right? And maybe you have some similar word in your own language, whichever it might be, that you could use, or maybe it's not quite right. But if you say you will not be attached to, if you want to be philosophically correct and say not be attached to becoming, people are going to look at this and say, what? They aren't going to understand it. So this is why we say existence in English. Okay? Any other questions about this stanza? Are you getting an idea of how I'm working through it? Do you have the process is pretty clear to you? I mean, for what I'm doing now, I'm going through it, I'm talking about it. Normally, because I've had experience, I'd go through it relatively quickly. You guys haven't had that yet. You're going to develop it. So it's going to take you a while and be painful at first, right? So, but you just have to do it. You have to go in and sit down and do it and torture yourself doing this, and eventually it'll get better. Okay, so let's now take a look on, we're going to move on. So now we actually move to the real section on prose. And I'm going to think about where is a paragraph? And as I kind of look through here, there's some little things that kind of tell you, oh, this is a little bit of a new section. And often when you see a word, a word sentence that begins with a de la, that tells you there's a new section, as we have there. Sometimes you have a tene, that tells you kind of that there's a new thing coming up. Or if you have the de na, this is another thing. This tells you that that what came before it, all of this stuff, is a reason for what comes after that. That might also be a good paragraph. But another one is the deang. This is actually a really good one. This is really telling you, this really probably is the beginning of a paragraph. So what I've been taking a look through these 4 or 5 lines, because I want to break it up into small parts to make it easier to deal with. So I'm going to say, well, okay, that deang looks like a pretty good candidate for where there must be a paragraph. Now, I might be wrong right now, but this is my horrid first draft, so I can always change it, right? Okay, so there's my new paragraph. Now I go here. Then we have de la. So here we have de la. What de la means is here we've got this verse, right? De la means about that, or to be really horribly literal. Why am I red? I don't want to be red. Oh. Regarding that. This is just, I mean, this phrase would not last in the final translation. I'm putting it down so you kind of know what's going on. This would not stay. I might even completely not translate the phrase de la. Okay. 토마코는 내 왼발을 타먹이 남을 이행마 타다 방라 lusem konglu. Now here we've got this la here, right? This la, often we think of la as being like a preposition in English, you know, in European languages, but actually it's different. Here it's functioning more like a conjunction. So here it's like we've got 2 sentences or clauses in English. There's the first sentence or the first clause, and there's the second clause, right? Do you see that? So when you have the la or any other tsikche that's following a verb, then it's usually functioning as a conjunction in English. So regarding that, so first only, because we've got toma, or at the beginning, is at the first, or at the beginning. At the beginning only. So here in English, that verb is going to have to come up first. Pang is like abandon. Now you could say give up. And in fact, I would be more likely to say give up as a final draft. I'm just intentionally doing things that are kind of literal like the dictionary because, I don't know, it's better to just say give up. Give up. Now, what are you giving up? Tada. Tada. So tada, I'm not going to bother looking it up in the dictionary because I already know the word. If you have to look it up, then you can look it up, of course. Give up. We've got tamagi, right? And we've got tada. So tada is like all, one of the many words for all. Ordinary, distractions. And then you've got that one bit that we haven't done yet, ne wempar. So ne wempar is like in an isolated, or maybe solitary is nicer. But actually in English, this would be better if it goes earlier in the sentence. Let's put it there. In a solitary place, give up all ordinary distractions. And you throw that la, right? Do you see that? The la here is going as the instruction, as the conjunction and in English. Lu sem kong he, relax your body and mind. Now you could start thinking about, well, is kong he, is relaxation the best translation for that word or not? In your first draft, don't worry, just translate, get something down. Later, you can go back and think, well, is there some other way to say relaxation that's going to match the feeling of kongli better than relaxation? But that's not the horrid first draft. So now we're on this next sentence. Santen ki chaja cha. So jawa is like to do. There are lots of verbs in Tibetan that mean like to do, that we translated in English, to do or to make. So it's like samten is here a specific type of meditation. So it's do the mudra. Chaja, right, is mudra. So do the mudra of dhyana. Now, samten is, sometimes people translate it in meditation. That's going to be more immediately understandable. It's not technically precise because meditation, actually, there's some people that say that dhyana is not meditation because it doesn't have insight if you're looking at it from the Mahamudra or the Dzogchen perspective. But we don't have to worry about that now. Dhyana is a specific type of meditation. And here they're just saying the mudra of equipoise like Amitabha. That's what they mean. But I'm just going to be literal and say the mudra of dhyana for right now because this is my horrid first draft. Chiwara lama tang. Now here we have one of these things. This is Chiwara lama tang. Is this a full sentence? No. The she in Tibetan do not match sentences in English. So we know that it goes through here. And we've got here what do we say? We've got this sentence, Chiwara lama tang, ningar yidam ge hla gom la, sowa daktu da. Now here we have another thing. We had that la in here in the first sentence of this paragraph, right? We've got a similar thing here, that la. Whoops, excuse me. Right? So what? This one didn't mean to get read. Okay. So here, that's another sort of like and in English. So we've got two things. So we've got gomla, and then we've got, what are we meditating on? Chiwar lama. So chiwa is this, right? Crown of your head. And ningar is easy, your heart. Okay, so there's a meditate, or you could say even better in English, visualize your guru on the crown. Now in English, you have to say crown of your head. Because if you just say crown, people might think that you're wearing the Queen of England's crown or something, right? Now, another way to just say it is you just go above your head. Now, another thing is that Chiwar Lama, in Tibetan, it's completely clear whose Chiwo you're talking about. But in English, if you say visualize guru above head, no one knows who you're talking about. Visualize guru above head. Whose head? Who's guru? What guru, right? So in English, we have to say your, or you could say the. The would be okay. But for the chiwo, you have to say your head. Otherwise, you don't know guru above head. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. So this is one of those things, I mentioned this in one of our earlier talks. You have to insert words that are going to make it understandable in your language. Otherwise, it's going to sound like gobbledygook, right? You have to make it understandable. Visualize the guru above your head, comma, and, sorry, no comma, and the yidam gihla in your heart. The yidam deity in your heart, comma, and sulwa jaktu da. Okay. So here we have sulwa jaktu da. So sulwa dapa is the phrase to pray, right? To pray or to supplicate. You can choose in English, and they have different feelings, so it's up to you. And daktu, what does daktu? Daktu means like with great force, right? Dakpa, violent sometimes even. So here we would say, when you're talking about praying, you wouldn't say pray violently. You would say pray fervently in English. So you have to pick the right word. It's not, you can't just think that, okay, dakpa, what does that mean? Oh, it means violent. So I'm going to say pray violently. And pray, oh, let me write this in. This is such a great translation. Pray violently. People are going to wonder, what are you talking about? How do you pray violently? Oops, what did I do? I hit the wrong key. Right? So you have to use your sense and talk about these words and pray fervently. Okay? Now, one thing I want to point out here, with both in the grammar of these sentences, this is something that you need to look at. In Tibetan tenses, if you look at it, you'll notice that, let's see, take out the pang here and the gomla. I'll just take both of these. Oops, wrong one. Wrong button. There. So both of these verbs are in the past tense. And the reason for that is that you do this action first, and then you do the second action. This is what we'd call probably the past, the kazo tatawe depa. In Tibetan, they talk about 9 tenses. Generally, you have the kazo de maung, kazo tatawa sumirwa, but you can divide them into 3. So the tatawe depa, tatawe maung, but tatawe tatawa. So here, this is what we would call that. It's kind of like saying like a perfective tense in English, or maybe actually not really that. At any rate, but that's just what you're talking about. One thing that will really help you in your translation, more than any other point of Tibetan grammar, is to learn Tibetan tenses. This is really important. Okay, this is one thing. It's because it kind of shows you in our languages we have really subtle distinctions between especially in French, you've got 27 different tenses. I don't know how many different it is in Spanish and Portuguese. I don't know what language Evelyn is in, but it's probably at least like English with 16 or 17. And so you've got to choose the right one. And so if you understand the Jusum and Namsha, and you know how it tells you how the actions are related, then it'll make it easier for you to pick which tense you want to do. Here in English, I'm translating this all into the imperative. These are instructions. Do this and then do that. So it's all going in the imperative. It's easy. Okay. Where did we get to? Then, yinandu la da tering ngang ma tonum konar michiwe deng top ang me. So this one, I'd look at it. Well, here I'm going to look and say, this seems strange because ngangma, what does ngangma mean? I think that this is probably a typo, and it probably should be ngam, ngangam, right? I think this is what it probably should be. That's when I just thinking about it, this is what would make sense to me. Today ngangma makes no sense. So now I'm going to take a look at that other edition and see what they say. Where is it? Something in Chiuragom. So here, it's the same thing. So these editors thought the same thing. Okay? So that's my guess that this is what this mean. And so the 10a, I'm going to say then, whoops, get it in English, then summon your mind inside. Well, this is my horrid first draft. but summon is, you normally would say ku, right? So it's like gather, maybe gather might be better in English. Now, this is about all the editing I'm going to do at this point. If I were going to go back and actually finish the translation, I'd go and refine this all quite a bit. So gather your mind inside, or maybe inward. I don't know. This is something that I'm going to think. I'm going to leave inward for now because this is my horrid first draft. Later, we're going to think about how to make it good. And then here, we have that la. And that la, again, is sort of like a conjunction. Ta tiringam, tiringam. This is what it is. Ta tiringam, tonup kora michiwe deng topang me. So here we've got actually a thing. So actually, so here actually we've got this whole thing, and here we've got the verb some at the very end of all of this. Right? Do you see that verb some? So I'm going to say, and think. Then I'm going to put it in quotes. Oh, okay. Because I say, look, this thing is kutlans, and there's really no other verb until I get down to the verb some down here. So it must be think that, and what you're thinking is, da is what? It's I. We often see the word da in texts translated from Sanskrit, where you could just say nga in ordinary Tibetan. So da and nga are the same. It's not like some exalted terms. If you think the self has, no, then we go back to the end of the sentence, get topang me, has not achieved any. Ding is like certainty or assurance. Deng is like your cause for popa. So that means like assurance. It's what gives you confidence that it will not die today or tonight only. We've got that konar again. But is this really the da? It's not. So when you say da, you cannot think that it just means the self. Obviously saying the self here is wrong. What it really means is I have, and then we've got this not achieved. This is, topa is actually the same as having. It's like, literally it means achieved, but the sense is often the same as having. So in English, we'd probably say, I do not have any assurance that, that I will not date tonight or tonight only. Now, later we can think about how to translate this konard and where it goes. So you can think about that when you're working on this on your own, okay? So I haven't any assurance about that. If I must die, rap lang. Now here's a nice Tibetan thing. You've got rap, ding, tama. So rap is the best. Ding is middling. Tama is the least or the worst. So at best, chlama lu. Chlama is like remainder or leftovers. Something would be left over, right? Lupa is to leave something behind. It's like saying, I'd leave something, or something would remain. That's literal, remain. Okay? At best, something would remain, but it's probably saying more likely, my guess is that it's probably saying, this is saying, there'd be something undone, would be undone. There'd be something left. Something be left to do. I'm going to put a question mark because this is my horrid first draft, and I know that makes me know that I need to look at it later. The middling, feel regret. Gyupa kye. So now here in Tibetan it says gyupa kye. The Tibetan idiom is gyupa kye, right? Which means literally, regret will arise. In English, we say we feel regret. So you could say, for the middling, regret will arise. Do you see that? You could say that, but it doesn't make any sense in English. So it's better to just say the middling will feel regret. And you can either say the worst or you could say the least. Or if I were the worst, zipe tap mi on. Top is like a way to do thing. What do you have to do? You have to bear it, but it's not going to work. Tap mi on. There'd be no way to bear it. Okay. Therefore, therefore, right? Nin sen. Kyun chasu tempe sung la. Be mindful or apply mindfulness, or literally grasp with mindfulness day and night and think, I am going to die today or tonight only. Okay. Now here I've got a problem because I already took that sum and put it up here. But here it is again. So when you're going back, you just note this problem now, and maybe you can go back and think and gather so maybe it should be here. Instead of putting that, it should gather your mind inward. And then maybe you could put a colon. I do not have any assurance that I will not die tonight, today or tonight only, and so forth. So that'd be another way to handle it. And you could put your quotes here. So this is kind of like the basic process I go through to do my Horde first draft. And then I would move on. I generally, after this point, I would go through the whole passage or the whole text or a chunk of the text, depending on the length of the text. If it's like if it's up to 20 pages, I would go through the whole text like this, and then go back from the beginning, maybe even up to 40 pages. If it's a longer text, I break it up into chunks and do each chunk at a time, go through it and then go back and revise it once, and then move on to the next and go back and revise, and then go back and revise again. So this is a, what do we say? So this is a beginning of a draft of this text. So now what I'd like to do, or what I think we ought to do now, is if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And then for next Tuesday, I've actually already prepared a Horde first draft with intentional mistakes in it. So what I will do is I am going to send that to Drupchen, who can distribute it to you all in a Microsoft Word file, so that I'll take the part that we've done here so that you have this part, and I'll put in the rest of my Horde first draft with intentional mistakes, and I will send it to you so that you have a Horde first draft in English to work with as you're doing this. Now, I often, when I'm translating, look to see, is there another translation of what I'm working on in a language that I know? And if I do, and then I kind of go through, and that's fair game. That's actually a good way to do it. If you have to retranslate a work, there's another translation, but you have to retranslate it. There's a reason why you have to retranslate it. But that other work, that other translation has things to teach you, even if it also has mistakes. So I'm going to send that to you. I'll send that to Drupchen in just a few minutes, and he can distribute it to you. I have to fix it up a little bit before we do this, but so you'll have that to look at as you go through. And so, as I said, go through, and at the very least, you should try to do a Horde first draft of the whole thing by next Tuesday. And if you want to go beyond that, you can also then take that Horde first draft and then do a revision or two. But save your Horde first draft separately so we can think about that on next Tuesday, right? Because this is an important point. You go through, you do a terrible translation, and then you improve it in your draft, in your subsequent drafts, right? So, so you can go as far as you like, and it depends a little bit upon how comfortable, how fast it is. This language is not always so, what what do you say? If you're not familiar with it, it takes a while to get used to it. Because this is, you know, probably 13th century translation. And I think it's actually a good translation. It's very, very understandable. But if you're not familiar with it, it's not so understandable. Okay. Any questions?
Yes. I have a question. It went very fast, but I didn't see in this last part what happens. Do we translate or not the ang? Chigona rabla ang la palu. This that is or and
yeah. Oh, you mean right? Yeah. Rabla ang.
That. So do you consider is part of the structure of the language?
Yeah.
Only and.
Yeah, I kind of left it out. But in English, you would say, this is say, what do you say? Something would be left to do. Would also, you could do, oops, sorry, got my caps lock on. Get my other keyboard back. Also be, something also, or would also, you could say, so in Tibetan, you'd say you have this. If you do everyone, you'd say, also would, right? So this is if you put it in, you have the ang also. But in English, we wouldn't say also in all three of these. And actually also might not be the right thing. So this is a word you have to think about. In English, what we would say, we probably wouldn't say that one. We might say that one. Or anything, or you could actually might be even an also, if I were the worst, instead put it there. This might be how I do it with just one also, or one equivalent for it, as opposed to three. Because in Tibetan, they'll use the ang more often than we use it in English. So you just have to think about it and what's going to work in your language, whatever you're translating into.
And if I may, just another question, the sam, I didn't even think the thinking that was applying to the previous three sentences.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I cut my sentences shorter. So
yeah, this is one of the problems.
Okay.
This is because you have to, this is a choice. I have seen places where that psalm definitely goes over 3 sentences or 4 sentences before. You have to look, because if you have it here in English, it really would make sense to say and think. Right? This is how normally we think about it in English. But then we've got Tempe Sungla. You know, maybe this is the verb, so maybe it's a, I don't know. You have to think about it. There are places where that would happen. It's like in English, sometimes you will have a long quote. So my guess when I was putting it in is, boy, it makes sense to say think here. And I've seen this before, so I'm going to put it in, but it might not be right. So you have to look at it. This is this is one of the things you have to evaluate.
One reason, for example, why it is maybe better to take longer pieces, like longer paragraph rather than sentence, because this.
Oh yeah, that's right. This is why I'm doing it like this paragraph sort of length per se, because I could also go through here and I could do it like this. Okay. Think that wherever I sit, I am going to die right there. Now I'm going to the next one, right? And if you do that, you won't see that. So this is why I take the slightly longer chunks of about the size that I do.
Okay.
Also, when you're looking at, you also have to look at this when you're doing verses, because often, not often, but there are enough times in verse where the thought will go over 2 or sometimes even 3 stanzas, and you have to look at it. In the what do we say? In the reciting the names from Manjushri, the thought goes for like 96 stanzas, or what, 140 stanzas. So, you know, you have to be careful.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think it looks like you all, I'm not sure if you are just shell-shocked or if you are so absorbed in thinking about how you're actually going to do this. At any rate, what I will do is I will send something along to Drupchen in a few minutes, and then you all can start, can have at it, and we'll see where you get to on Tuesday. You'll probably have more questions then. Okay? So let's now...
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Could you re-explain the Tamalgi number at the beginning of this paragraph, please?
Oh, Tamalgi number. So what we've got here is we've got the word Tamil, we've got number Yengwa.
Oh, okay.
Right? Tamalgi number Yengwa, and they're connected by this gi. So that's the phrase. So number Yengwa, because it's translated from Sanskrit, that number Yengwa. So this is another thing you just have to keep in mind. Shakashri Bhadra wrote this in Sanskrit, and it was translated. So you're going to see lots of these number Yengwa. When in Tibetan, they just, later language, a Tibetan would just say Yengwa. Okay?
Thank you. And below lak malu, could it ma be a negative for lu?
La? Lupa.
Yes.
Lama lupa is something left over. Lupa, it's the Tibetan idiom for when something is left over. It remains behind. I'd leave something behind, or I wouldn't have done something. There'd be something left.
But this could never be the negative for lupa. Could it be the ma?
Well,
just before.
Lupa, it is the negative for lupa. The verb is lupa.
So is it lakma right, and the verb lupa, or lak, short form of the noun, and malu?
Oh, hlatma is this is here because it's hlat malu. If it's hlat malu, then it would be that'd be an interesting thing. There'd be hlat, nothing would be left. Right? But maybe it's hlatma, because hlatma is also the hakpa and hlatma. Mm-hmm. Now here in this context, the reason why I think that it's hlatma lu, something remaining would be left, is because of the context. It's because even that doesn't sound good. The best is that there'd be something left. Because he's meditating on impermanence. He wants to spur himself to doing that. So in the best case, there's something left. In the middling case, then I'd regret it. And in the worst case, I couldn't bear it. Now, if the best case, then there wouldn't be anything left. Then it would be all done. At that point, it would be like, that sounds kind of good. So I don't need to practice today. I'm all right. Maybe I'm in that best category. That's the way I'm thinking about it. But this is where obviously having someone explain it, someone with the Qijun, the Lunjun, not just the Lunjun, but the Qijun actually teach it to you would be helpful, or to see the Sanskrit, which is unlikely with this text.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then continuing on this passage, here, Rab, Dring, and Tama, are we talking about cases or people, individuals?
Well, you could translate it either way. It could be cases. And actually, I was looking at it. It could be because here in the Jing Nam, it's in the plural, right? We've got that pluralizer here. But here, it's Gyurana. So this is where it's a little bit inconsistent. And in the when we were doing it, this occurred to me, but I didn't think about it. So here it sounds like it's talking about other people because it's in the plural, or people in general. Rab, it's not so good. And Tamar Jordana, it sounds like it's talking about me, perhaps being one of those worst people. So you kind of have to think about it. In English, you would have to kind of make a decision about that, and probably in French you would as well. In Tibetan, it's kind of a little bit loose, and people just figure you're going to get it. But in English, you have to decide. So I would say, in terms of the meaning, if in the best case, I'd probably say in the best case there'd be nothing left. In the middling case, I'd feel a regret, and at worst, I couldn't bear it. Right? Or maybe just at best, in the middling, and then at worst, something like that. That would be also a reasonable way to take a look at it. Okay, well, I think that this is probably enough for today, and we will see you on Tuesday. I will send you the version with intentional mistakes later. Sunamdi tamje sipani topne nyebe danam pamche de kiega naji balong trupai sipe tsole droku nurdul sho. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.